Greetings, welcome back to people who already joined this edition 2024 of the A4Q Testing Summit. I have a very special lady with me now, Sue Atkins from Planet, who I love spending time with. So I'm looking forward to this session very much. Sue's going to talk a little bit about manual testing and praise of manual testing. So enjoy. Please pop your questions down in the comments box, and I know Sue will love to answer those at the end of the session. And she wants questions. She's already given me an indication she will ask. We will be asking people to vote for their most preferred presentation at the end of the summit. So pay attention and just remember Sue, please. I just remember everybody, of course, but I'm going to move now. I'm going to get off the stage and ask Sue to carry on. So thank you, Sue. Welcome.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Debbie. Okay, yes, welcome to my talk in terms of in praise of manual testing. I just wanted to address the balance a little bit because it seems like there are so many presentations at the moment about automation, tool use, AI, etc. And from my perspective, I think we've got to keep thinking about manual testing and what it can do for us. So first things first, I'd like to say that I'm not against automation. In fact, I was one of the first folks in the UK to introduce and support and promote test automation, test running tools, test execution tools, and performance testing. So my background is very much in the use of tools and automation. But as I say, we need to sort of address the balance around this because I find it a little troubling that the current drive is to automate everything. At the moment, manual testing seems to be treated like something to be avoided at all costs, something that seems to be outdated or slows delivery down. Automation, on the other hand, especially now with adding in the concepts of AI as well, automation is seen as sexy, new and challenging. So probably one of the most frequent questions I get asked in terms of the training world is, how do I get into automation? Closely followed by, what's the best language I should learn? And this is almost suggesting that testing in all its diversity is not valued unless it can be automated. But what I want to put forward is that manual testing provides us with so much more than just a few tests run. Manual testing is a powerful tool that we lose at our peril. Now, of course, it's a really good idea to start with a definition around what we're talking about for this particular presentation. You could argue that we shouldn't make a differentiation about testing, manual testing, test automation, etc. That testing is testing. Sometimes we use tools and sometimes we do it by hand. But having said that, manual testing is a pretty commonly accepted term. So let's work with that for the moment. Now, as I say, manual testing has many flavors. We could look at ad hoc testing, error guessing. With ad hoc testing and error guessing, we're using the tester's gut feel and instinct to sniff out the bugs. Moving that out to exploratory testing. Exploratory testing is a powerful test practice that allows us to execute tests whilst we can currently build that mental model of the system and construct the overall testing that we want to do as we go. We can loop that into technique-driven. I like to think of the test techniques as having a sort of technique goggles. So if I'm using my testing techniques when I'm doing the manual testing, then I might be looking for particular things like state transitions or partitions. So the techniques can inform the manual testing that we're doing. And of course, is the good old favourite of scripted testing. Now, scripted testing, I think, still has a place in what we're doing. Yes, it can be seen as time-consuming and boring and probably too much information. And I have a sneaking suspicion that the scripted testing is where manual testing got its bad name from. But I think it still has a place. It's immensely useful in clarifying what has actually been done, what steps we've taken. And of course, anybody in your team should be able to follow the scripts. And also notice I'm sticking with scripts and scripting because at the end of the day, Shakespeare did not write procedures. So we've got all of these particular types, these flavors. So in terms of calling it what we want to call it, as I say, I'll touch on names for this, but manual testing for me is basically hands-on testing. The very act of getting our hands on the system provides us with learning and feedback. Learning and knowledge acquisition is not just brain-bound. Manual testing allows us to actually work with the system. If we just use automation, then we're missing out stuff. It's a bit like visiting the Sydney Opera House, for example, but only seeing it through the lens of a camera. How many times have you been on holiday and you've spent so much time taking the photographs that you don't actually see the things that you're photographing? So automation, running those tests, to me, is one step away from actually working with the product. And of course, we've known this for ages. We have a Confucian saying that says, I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. So say, the very act of working with something to understand its quirks, its foibles, etc., is what is where our learning takes place. So what can the human do for you? Why should we keep the human in the loop? Why should we keep doing manual testing? Well, interestingly enough, we tend to interact with computers and technology in a way that we understand as humans. We map it to things that we know. So, for example, desktop is something we're familiar with. And of course, we map that onto our computers. Some folks don't get GUI, but desktop works for us. So as a human, we tend to build on these principles, and we work with these systems in three main ways. Sometimes we don't even know we're doing it. But as an example, we've got person. So we commonly have a conversation with somebody. So for example, Alexa, what's the weather like in Stockholm today? Or the classic one now, chatting with ChatGPT. So we're connecting to these systems in our head in the same way or a similar way as if they were a person. Place. In our household, we have various devices, tablets, etc. We've got one tablet that we call the portal because we view it as a way of connecting onto the internet and getting information about all sorts of things. But we probably are more familiar with the idea of logging into your bank or browsing the shelves of an online supermarket. Of course, now we also get lost in the corridors of social media or diving into those rabbit holes. The third one that we work with is that of tools. So extending our capabilities. I'm currently taking place in a challenge to do 10,000 steps a day. So I'm using my GPS watch to augment and instrument my activities to see how many steps I'm actually doing. So I'm using that as a tool. So really, if we know that as humans we work with this idea of person, place, tools, we need to be thinking about how we're going to test the systems in that way as well. So, as I say, the way we relate to systems, devices, products is part of our innate humanness, and we need to test in the same way. So, what else do humans bring to the picture? Well, I think one of the greatest ones that we bring is that of imagination. And if you think about our imagination and how we use that in testing, the idea of personas and empathy, we can empathize with the end user to understand, how they might use this system, how this product might work, the problems they might encounter. But just base imagination. As I say, do you remember when as a child you played at being a doctor, pilot, or cowboy? You could be anything you wanted to be. And movies, computer games, books are an extension of that. You can lose yourself in a Bond movie, travel to the other worlds of Star Trek or Star Wars. But it goes even further than that. I put a little picture up there of a child in a superhero suit. If you think about, if you have children, have they ever wanted to go to play school or nursery school dressed in this particular outfit? Because interestingly enough, the very act of putting on particular clothing can alter your understanding of things, the way you feel about things. So the child putting on the superhuman, the superhero costume, going to school, makes them that little bit more brave for going into a difficult situation. If you put on a lab coat, that could make you more attentive. Night clothes can make you more sleepy. And I'm actually running this presentation. I'm standing and I have my office gear on, if you like. There's no pajamas or no slippers. So in order to be able to do the presentation, talk professionally. So just remember that if you're Zooming with your slippers on, it might affect the way things go. It also ties to the next one in terms of creative thinking. Humans are very creative, and I find it absolutely fascinating as to how products are used, the leaps that people take in terms of that. So creative thinking, lateral thinking, etc. Now, the last one in terms of putting on particular clothing, that was used for great effect by Edward de Bono with his 6 thinking hats to get you to think in a particular way. Ties very nicely with the creative thinking. But say, humans are great at picking out patterns and interesting characteristics. Just as a little example, if I put up an image, what do you see there? I was putting some towels into a box. I put the towels into a box. I put the lid on the box. I put the box on the shelf. And then I turned round and nearly spooked myself because I don't know about you. I see a face, somewhat malevolent, but that's reading something out of a set of towels in a box. How about this one? A pancake I made. Is it just a pancake, or is it saying, please don't eat me? This one, on the other hand, I'll leave you and your imagination to work out what that one's saying. Something else we're really good at is this multiple layer processing. Something that the human excels at, focusing on something and yet alert for other clues and twitches. It's almost like a sixth sense. A really good illustration of this for me is driving. Prior to the pandemic, before we changed our working pattern so much, you might have been driving to an office. You might have driven the same route again and again and again. to the point where you get to the office one day and you just don't remember having driven it. But if something had occurred on that route, a car pulling out on the side or a child's ball running into the road, you would have immediately reacted without having to consciously think about it. It's been pushed into the non-conscious part, so pulling that out. So as I say, like a sixth sense. So we're really good at focusing on something, getting into the zone, but we're alert for other clues and twitches. A box resizing, a font changing, something not so easy to recognize in terms of automation. So as I say, the ability to use these different capabilities can provide valuable insights in how the system might be used and uncover issues. So why the negative view of manual testing? Well, I've already said it's possibly got something to do with the laborious process that used to be scripting, but it could also be something to do with the name, because manual testing, well, that sounds like manual labor, and that might be considered unskilled. Although my master bricklayer of a father might dispute that one. Manual activities are often thought of as inaccurate and prone to mistakes. Yeah, possibly, but they're also very highly regarded manual activities. In the French fashion houses, clothes made by hand, individually stitched, are highly prized. Manual implies slow and time-consuming. It can be considered expensive. It could be considered inefficient. But those may be negatives, but on the other side, look at what I've just described. Now, we could come up with a different term. Julian Harty, for example, prefers the term in-person testing. And this highlights that the human needs to be present, bringing all their skills and capabilities to bear on the task in hand. So, say, maybe reframing it to just testing, and automation then becomes testing with tools, or in-person testing, but recognizing the skills that we would miss out on otherwise. So added into this, why do we need to keep the human in the loop? I've already mentioned and hopefully put a good case as to why manual testing is so vital, but what else? Well, the first thing, there's a couple of main points, but the first thing I think is your customer. Your customer doesn't care about the technical stuff. Your customer just wants to get a job done with as little pain and frustration as possible. I'm a Starlink customer. This presentation is coming to you from the middle of a forest via Starlink. Now, when I first went Starlink, I'm a fairly technical person, so I thought, yep, not a problem. I'll know how to set this up. I'll know what I'm doing. But Starlink as a product has been so well thought through, I didn't need to do anything. I set the little dish up in the garden. I plugged it in, and all the cables are set up in such a way that you just plug them in. You can't plug them in incorrectly. It then went out and looked for all the Starlink satellites, and within 20 minutes, I had broadband. Something that I thought I was going to have to configure and set up and play around with settings, all the things that I'd been doing up until the Starlink turned up. It just works. So I didn't need to be technical in order for it to actually work. We've also got the process itself. Keeping the human in the loop, we should be able to ask these questions around the process, around the development of particular products. Just because we can build something doesn't mean that we should build it. I've used the illustration here in terms of a toothbrush because, yes, okay, manual toothbrushes are pretty good. They're eminently portable. I just have one in my travel bag. Whereas an electric toothbrush, yes, it probably cleans your teeth better, but it will need charging, and what's its recycle element, etc., etc. But there is also a toothbrush that costs, I think in the UK, I think it's £500. It comes with an app that you have on your phone. So now you have to charge not only the toothbrush, but also your phone. You have to take your phone into the bathroom with you when you're cleaning your teeth, and the app will tell you when you've cleaned your teeth sufficiently. How much effort went into creating that app? I would love to know how many people have actually bought one of these toothbrushes. So if you're in the audience and you have one, let me know. But it seems like an awful lot of extra stuff that we didn't really need. All of that one hopefully has been tested as well. So this process element, there was a really good book published, really good book published now, quarter of a century ago. It's called The Inmates Are Running the Asylum, and the subtitle is How to Restore the Sanity, why high-tech products drive us crazy and how to restore the sanity. And in it, the author, Alan Cooper, somewhat humorously puts forward two groups of people in the software development world. And he named them Homo logicus and Homo sapien. Now, Homo sapien is, of course, us, the humans, the people going to be using the products. And Homo logicus are the techies creating the products. The trouble is, in our world, most of us are Homo logicus. I'm certainly, I'm the techie. I'm the one that is tolerant of things hanging, and I've got countless different phones and tablets and all sorts of things. So I recognize that I'm more Homo logicus than Homo sapien. And I have to bring myself back to thinking like the customer in order to understand the customer's perspective. Now, say this was 25 years ago, but then there was a recent book only last year, in fact, published on the 7th of September last year, which is The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman and Michael Bhaskar. And in that, we had the same idea. Mustafa talks about Homo sapien, and he calls them Homo technologicus, which in some ways I think works a little better. But it's the same idea that just because we've got these wonderful developments, these fantastic products, these ideas that are coming through, it doesn't necessarily mean to say that we should. We've got to look at the full implications of it, because at the end of the day, our customers are more likely to be Homo sapien than Homo technologicus. As I say, Homo sapien wants products that work well for them. So ideally, what we're after is trying to find the correct balance of manual and automated for the project context. We need to bring all the human qualities to bear when using, when testing products that humans will use. And that's what I'm trying to put forward. Try not to lose that in terms of this drive for automation, AI, tools, etc. We still need to focus on the fact that the customer is king. Customer quality is in the eye of the beholder. So my plea in terms of praise for manual testing. So any thoughts, questions, queries in terms of that particular presentation?
Thank you, Sue. I'm hoping that sparked a lot of queries and questions. You did a very good job arguing the point there. Let's have a quick look. Have we got any questions here? Oh, do you think all testers need to be able to code, Sue?
That one's an interesting one. Now, obviously, as I say, I started out as a developer in quite a few years ago. I was working with languages that not many people probably remember. So I have an appreciation of code structures and know how things are actually put together. But I don't think that all testers should need to code, because that pushes everybody into the homologicous side. So from my perspective, I think, as always, we're looking for a good mix of people on the teams in terms of product development. So I would love to have people on the team who don't code, because they should have a slightly better Homo sapien perspective rather than the homologicous element. So yeah, it's useful knowing what code constructs are. And obviously some of the testing that I do is harking back to the days in terms of code quality. But I don't think everybody on the team should know how to code.
Do you see a big difference in the type of job adverts that are going out, Sue? Or, are more employers saying you need to be able to code?
Yeah, that is, again, that's an interesting one, because yes, but I don't think the employers fully understand what it is they're looking for. I'd love to know where it's all coming from, because the number of times I've seen job adverts for testers and it says, you must hold a computer science degree or something like that. And some of the best testers I've met have not come from the computing industry. I've people that have come from things like astrophysicists and geologists. They've made fantastic testers. They're intelligent. They think about things in a different way, but they're not computing people in that sense. So I'd love to know where the employers are getting this requirement from that says you have to be able to code. Automation, certainly in my head, and certainly, as I said right at the start, that's where I started in terms of test tooling. Automation is programming. You need to have programming skills. You can probably automate first and then work out, you can be coached in how to test, but you'll need the programming skills in order to actually do automation. So this demand for all testers to code seems to be a bit odd.
But you're seeing this. It's not just my imagination when I'm looking at the job ads on Indeed. It's definitely there, and automation skills are always now in the job ads, it seems, as well, which is a little bit contrary to maybe what you're saying there again. Back to employers not perhaps understanding what they're requiring there.
Yes, yeah, I think I don't want to sound like it's just me as a tester, but it does seem that organizations don't necessarily know. I don't want to tar all organizations with the same brush, but they don't necessarily know what testing is about. So consequently, when they think, oh, right, we need a testing approach, and therefore we need everybody to code and we need everybody to do automation, that's pushing everybody towards the homologicous side, when probably your customer target market is going to be maybe 90% Homo sapien. And it just, you want to test to your end user rather than, force down a particular route.
Thank you. Next question from Marcus. Any tips on how to convince product managers that manual testing still has value?
Do some and highlight the things that you find. So again, if you've got people on the team that are really good manual testers, there's not everybody is going to be the best at the qualities I've already described, but you probably know somebody who only has to touch a computer system and something will go wrong. So if that person gets their hands on the system, has a play with it, error guessing, exploratory testing, you can highlight the things that you found and then use that, put numbers on it, cost of defects found at this point, put the numbers on it, push that back to the project managers and product managers and say, look, this is what we found with this short space. These are the defects that we found. If this hadn't been trapped, and you can probably do a comparison to see which ones might have been caught by automation. That way you can say, well, and I'm pretty sure there will be some that you will find that wouldn't have been caught by automation. As I say, screen resizing, fonts that change, values that don't necessarily flow through. So use that to evidence it back to the project managers and product managers.
Thank you. I hope that helped, Marcus, and please do comment if you've got any other thoughts about that yourself. Next question. How can testers develop their human skills? That's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Human skills.
Well, yes. This another one of the ones that I've just obviously spoke about in terms of things like imagination, lateral thinking, creative thinking. There are a number of sort of books and exercises that you can do, but it's really find someone who thinks differently or thinks the way that I've been talking about, and buddy with them, see what they do as to how do they think. That can be quite useful. One of the exercises that I do in my training is to get a bag of things. So I just go round. I've got an old bag, or it can be anything, actually, a plastic bag or something, and just collect things, any things. And I really do mean anything. I did it for a group of folks at Eurostar. And you then pull the thing out of the bag and that think about the object that you've just pulled out of the bag to say, how might this affect the system that I'm testing in some way? And it generates test ideas, and it allows you to do that creative thinking, that creative leap. And the more you do it, the better you get at it, the easier it becomes. It takes a while to get it. Some people never get it, but you can start to develop different ways of seeing things.
We talked about kind of automation versus manual testing, and somewhere amongst all this mix, I guess, is AI and the impact that that's having on us at the moment.
Yeah.
Have you any thoughts about the manual tester and where AI perhaps has a good use, and where perhaps you'd urge a little bit of caution?
Right. The caution goes back to what I said. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. So that's the caution element, because and it was also in the book that I mentioned, in the Coming Wave book, around some of the ways that people are jumping onto the AI bandwagon in order to allow AI to develop products without human intervention. So from my perspective, that to me is the caution area. Now, the positive side in terms of manual testing, it can be immensely useful through the use of prompt engineering, etc., to actually ask AI for test ideas. And I've been trying out seeing what I can get AI to give me in terms of test ideas for particular applications. Because, of course, one of the things that manual testers use an awful lot is heuristics.
Yes.
So we have heuristics that we can, we're never stuck for what testing we can do, because we can always pull a heuristic out and give it a go. One of my favorites is the get angry heuristic, where basically you get somebody who gets so frustrated with their device, their laptop, their phone, that they just bash all the keys or stab the screen. So I gave the get angry heuristic to AI to see what, ChatGPT-4, to see what it would give me back in terms of things that I could try to simulate the get angry heuristic. And I got some reasonable ideas, most of which I thought myself. So, but I think that's where it's going to come. I don't think ChatGPT at the moment fully gets the concept of heuristics, but I'm sure that will add into the equation as the models learn more. We'll get more of that. But so hopefully it will become another tool that, as a manual tester, it can give us some ideas of things that we can do.
Excellent. Do we have some more questions here? Wellington, thank you. Why not have both manual and automation experts? The manual testers can document their process and then hand it over to the automation experts to, automate. Thoughts, Sue?
Yeah, very much so. I think that's the perfect example in that sense. If you think back to what I said right at the outset in terms of scripting, if a manual tester has thought about the tests, it goes back to the idea of where is the value in the test, and it's generally the thought process. So if the manual tester has thought about the test, then we can hand that test to the automation experts to automate. That can then be run as an automated test. And this is where I say I think we need the mix of skills on a project. So as we've got the really good automators and the really good manual tester, Homo sapien type people that can actually give us the best coverage and focus on the customer. So although of course you can't automate everything. So
okay, let's see what we have next. We've had this one before. I think maybe we're all good now. I'm just looking at what the team are saying there. So thank you so much, Sue. The recordings of the sessions will be available, so people can dip in and out and listen again, which I know people like to do. So they will be on the YouTube channels, LinkedIn, etc. If there are questions that people have for Sue, I'm sure she'd be delighted to be contacted or do comment in the chat, and we'll pass it on to Sue and ask if she can share an answer. Thank you so much, Sue. Fantastic as always. It's a pleasure listening to you. And for everybody here, please stay tuned or check out the rest of the A4Q Testing Summit edition 2024 sessions. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.